Hi, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I render. If you notice that I sound a little different between the takes, that's because I separated it into multiple days. Right now I'm currently sick, so it's going to sound a little different. But anyway, I hope you enjoy. Okay, for this one, okay, don't mind that there's not leave here. But anyway, for this one, I accidentally started the rendering without like recording, so I'm just going to explain a little bit. So for the back hair, it has its own layer over here. It's HR2, and then the SDW is a shading, it's a gradient. So what I do is I add blue because the back hair, or essentially the hair that would be in the background, is completely black because the hair that's in the front is quote unquote black, but it's not. It's like a lighter black, for example. It's a dark blue or a dark gray, so it gives the illusion that it's black, but it's really not, only so we can use black for shading and stuff like that. So then I put blue because it's in the background, and as you progress towards the background you go with lighter shading, if that makes sense. So like it could fade into what would be the quote unquote horizon. And then for this one, the sleeve is here. I don't know if you can see it right here. Let me see if I can find it right here. Since it's gonna be ruffles or like a bigger sleeve near the shoulders, there's going to be weight at the bottom, so there's gonna be shading there, and then a little bit on the top. So it depends on direction. Like how you see these lines here, that's where the fold's gonna be. So then I added shading at the bottom, and then here I added like a sort of V. That's because this character has chest, so the shirt doesn't go flat down, but rather it protrudes out more. And then here for the neck, there's also going to be another type of V. This is only because um, the neck isn't flat either. Like this, the whole body has curves and shapes where it's not necessarily flat. So we're gonna see a whole lot of like movement in the shading. And then down here, the shoes, I was going simple with it. Like I only really added black shadow and then called it a day because since the skirt is gonna be so dark and stuff like that, I was like, you know what, I'll just do a black shadowing and call it a day from there. It's nothing too super crazy, it's just super simple. Like you get the idea that it's a big skirt, and then with the black shadow it adds layers and folds. And then the shoes are also the same color, so simple and easy. Similar to how I explained earlier, there's going to be a lot of movement, so you're going to see a lot of curves. Right now I'm just doing the edge of the jacket because to not make it look flat, you would have to add a little bit of shading at the rim, so where the neck part ends, if that makes sense. And then from there I started adding shading in the shoulders because it's not going to stay flat, similar to how I said before. You're going to see a lot of triangles and a lot of curvature, so we want to keep shape, if that makes sense. Nothing flat if possible. Also, another thing, you might notice that with some of the shading that I did, that some of it is blurred and there's like a sort of gradient. That really is up to personal preference. For example, I like to. It's because I don't know how to say it in English. But the word in Spanish is desvanecer. And so you fade. I think the word is fade. So you fade in some places based on preference, and you can't keep everything super solid when it comes to shading. Some things just fade and it looks nicer, and it's just about trying out. Oh, it looks really nice, faded in and out, or oh no, this one looks better solid. I'm pretty sure there's more to it than that, but that's how I like it. Um, Once I begin to learn a lot more about shading, because there's definitely a lot more to learn, I'll explain that once I get to it. However, for now, I just like fading in some places where I think it'll look nice. The way I think about it is like, oh, the light isn't really gonna reach here, or it's gonna close in on the light, so it's gonna start fading in. For example, oh my god, it'd be better if I had the camera so I could display with hands. But essentially, where you think is the darkest place, for example, let's say you have a triangle, and then in this triangle you have the light facing one way, so face A is getting all the light, and then face B isn't getting as much light. So the darkest point would be, okay, so you have point A, B, and C because it's a triangle, and then you have face A. So point B is where the light is beginning to reach because you haven't gotten to C yet. So it's a middle point. So that's where I would begin to blur at point B in order to get this sort of gradient. And then at point C, it's a little more solid and it's not necessarily a gradient anymore. Anyway, I hope that made sense. Anyways, for the wrinkles on the skirt, there's definitely going to be a lot of more use and a lot more use and more V's because it's a very fluid thing. Well, sorry, it's not a skirt, it's an apron. It's just that it's like one of the bigger ones. Anyway, so you have to display that. You have to put that. Well, that's only if you really want to make it semi-realistic. This piece is almost semi-realistic. It's not necessarily as realistic because I was lazy in some parts. But anyway. And there, you get a weird shape there. That's because you have multiple folds. You have where the apron wraps around, where you're lifting the apron, and then also since it's going down. So you have like three main points as to why it would wrinkle that way. So that's why I made it the way it is right now. Anyway, so you see a dark point right there, the one that I'm highlighting at the moment. That's because it's an inner fold. So it's fold 1, fold 2. Fold 2 is darker because it's going in, if that makes sense. I should have probably done more lines to honestly make sense of that, but I didn't, at least not yet. But that's how it looks like. It's a little bit darker. Remember how I said triangle A, B, and C? Point A, B, and C. So this would be C inside. And then B would be the bigger triangle that's holding in point C. It's a little confusing. I'll try to make something so it's a little more easier to understand. So there's going to be a lot of lines and triangles in this. I probably should have done my shading differently and the right side of the drawing, but I don't think I went back and fixed it. I should have, but I didn't. Anyway, another big point. If your character has a chest, you're going to see how I did the like sort of weird W shading and then a triangle. That's because so their chest and then pulling down is the apron. And then you have some vanishing points. Well, not vanishing points because that's different. That's for horizon. That's I don't know what else is that. So it's a fade in point. So let's call it that. So the shadows aren't going to be as strong anymore. Also, back to what I was saying in terms of the chest. That's because it's not flat. So if it were on the sweater itself instead of the apron, you would also see the same shading. That's because, so you see bump for their chest and then down because it's going to, the apron is going to try to reattach to the body, if that makes sense. So you have that space of, okay, there's a bump here. And then as I progress down towards the body, it gets closer. This is for the apron. That's why the shading looks like that. I probably should have done more for, like I said, the right side again, I was just being lazy. I was supposed to, I just didn't. But I was more focused on the left side because there's so many wrinkles that I had to pay attention to, and I just didn't. So sorry for that. Here, I also wanted to mention that you should probably, not probably, but you should have a gray background, relatively in the middle, not necessarily dark gray or super light gray, but just in the middle. Why? Because it helps you pick colors that stand out. Because if you go with a white background, almost any color will stand out. But then if you pick like a middle grade gray, then you start picking colors that really stand out, and your drawing doesn't look as faded or as pale. So unless you're going for that, then I would definitely recommend a gray background because then it'll help you pick colors that really stand out, and then not too much, but help stand out and then look nice in the final product. Okay, for this one, honestly, if you're an artist like me where you don't use lines, I would recommend knowing how to separate everything. For example, right now, Big Q has bandages on her head, right? And it's like a blob of just white. So I would definitely like what I'm doing right now, like some of them are darker blue and some of them are, you know, a light blue. You have to be able to make a shape or form out of that blob, if that makes sense. So what I did consistently is that the shading is what makes it take form. So that's very important. Not only are you shading with the shading, but you're also making your object take form, which is important because then if you just shade and it's not taking form, then people are going to be confused and you're also going to be confused. So it's better to just one, take form, two, shade. So I definitely recommend that. Right now, it looks very simple. Like I said, I wasn't trying super hard. I should have tried harder, yes, but I wasn't trying super hard. Um, so not only are some of them darker, you could also see some vanishing in, if that makes sense. And then one of the nicer things about this is that in that blob or that color, you could also cut in and erase some things in order for it to take a little bit more form. With lines, I feel like that's a little bit harder because then you have to go fix the lines and also the color. But then again, you know, the lines look nice. I'm not gonna lie, they look nice. Okay, and by this point, I started adding gradients. What are the gradients for? Just for it to look nice and also to make the darker points stand out. They should be the darker points, but for some of them, for example, the skirt, which is the darkest one, I add a lighter gradient. So where it should be the darkest, I add a lighter. So where we see the apron and skirt connect, that should be the darkest point. But I'm honestly going with a lighter one. That's because it is a darker color. So we want it to stand out a little bit more. Similar to how I said about the horizon. Okay, and that was all for this tutorial. I hope it helped you guys and showed you guys how I render. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below or let me know privately. However, I hope you enjoyed and thank you for watching.